The sirens died at the intersection, and the radio slid into the space they left like a hand into a glove. Liam, do not bury the ambulance ramp at Bay 2. Keep a channel at Mass General, Fruit Street. Drop sand on the incline and leave us one clean cut. I'd drive plow 14, a bright orange 7-ton with a V-plow up front and a wing on the right that can shave a lane to the curb when the night lets me. I'm Liam O'Rourke, 31, born in Dorchester, raised on proms and parades and the sound of my old man tapping salt from his boots at the door. Nights like this are why the city pays me. A nor'easter with an attitude, the kind that turns Storrow into a myth and Beacon Hill into a gym membership people didn't know they had. The windshield is a theater of snow. The wipers keep time like drummers who've seen this set list too many times. My cab smells like road salt, coffee that forgot its promise. And the rubber gloves I keep in the glove box because you never know when frostbite or kindness will put in a request. Copy. Bay 2 stays open, I answered, watching the wind stack drifts along Cambridge Street like the city was building a wall just to see if I'd argue. I'll shave you a path and leave the berms where they belong. This is Aiden, Incident Command at MGHED, the voice added, steady without trying to impress me. We've got a ventilator transfer inbound and a mom in the lobby timing contractions with the patience of a saint. If you can, throw a striped-down fruit and one pass along Blossom. And Liam, thank you. He said, do not like a gift. He said my name like a handrail. I eased the plow into the wind's teeth and took Cambridge east, wing down, spreader on. The night tasted like iron and ocean. Every pass made a sentence you could actually read. Every minute the storm tried to erase it like a jealous editor. A delivery van had abandoned its philosophy near Stanford. I nosed it gently with the blade, just enough to convince it to reconsider its position in the universe, and it surrendered to the curb with a sigh. A guy in a Red Sox beanie gave me a thumbs up through a fogged window. The universal Boston sign for "we'll call it even." But the part I hadn't seen coming was only then squaring its shoulders. Liam, confirm you heard the nod on Storrow. We've got drivers trying to prove physics is a rumor. Do not attempt Storrow eastbound. Memorial Drive is closed. Bring your cut to Fruit and Blossom, then swing toward Causeway if you've got fuel. Storrow's dead to me, I said. Because if you're from here, you know the river road is a trap, even in July, and January just writes that in bold. Fruit first. The bridge over Charles Circle wore 10 fresh inches like a dare. I set the blade angle, took a breath, and pushed into it, the truck shuddering in a way that felt like a conversation I'd had with too many exes. We can do this if we're both honest. The snow rolled in waves off the wing, piled as a clean wall where the sidewalk would forgive it, and the world behind me looked temporarily plausible. I rolled into Fruit Street like I'd been invited. Mass General in a storm is a town. The ambulance bay lights were halos in a night that didn't want to believe in them. A security guard in a black beanie did the dance of men wearing radios and jackets with too few pockets. Bay 2 yawned, an open mouth waiting for proof of our promise. I swung around, lifted the blade just enough to keep from scalping the asphalt, and shaved the cut they'd asked for. Salt rattled from the spreader like a pack of coins, insisting they were paper money. I felt the incline under the tires like a truth we had to respect. Channels open, I told the radio. Bay 2 has a clean mouth and a sanded tongue. Copy, Aiden said, and I could hear the smile he wasn't wasting time making. We're about to earn it. A basic life ambulance eased down Cambridge trying to behave like a figure skater and a sofa at the same time. I stopped the plow where the wind would lose its argument, hazard lights painting the snow orange. Out climbed 2 EMTs with faces like they'd learned new definitions for friction. Inside, I could see a boy in his 20s and the kind of color that makes your chest do math. They moved without theater, reach, lock, breathe, grip. It wasn't my job to help, and it wasn't my job not to. I hovered right at the edge of useful, a human snowbank that could lift if asked. One glance from the shorter EMT, a nod like he'd known me since the call began. I took the foot of the gurney and we slid it like a secret across the one strip of asphalt the storm hadn't yet tasted. Thanks, boss, he said. Boston calls everyone boss when it means I see you. Don't bury the ramp, I told him, and he laughed even if it wasn't a joke. Liam, if you can, Give me a quick stripe down, Blossom. Aiden came back. We pushed a code cart to Wang, and my staff deserved not to pretend they're hockey players. If you're short on time, fruit is king. Blossom's getting a kiss, I said, because sometimes phrases like that are how you stay warm. I did the pass, careful not to stack a berm where someone's night would become worse. A kid in a Tufts hoodie tried to take a selfie in the headlights, decided the wind owned his phone, and retreated with dignity. I took the corner sharp and painted a clean line down North Grove just because it would make someone's walk possible. As I came out onto Cambridge again, the radio coughed like a smoker who'd quit, except not tonight. Citywide to all units, Green Line power experiencing dips between Lechmere and North Station. Expect increased pedestrian load near Causeway. Do not block intersections at Merrimac and Causeway. Keep room for buses and EMS. Causeway in a blizzard is where Boston remembers it's built on stubborn. I rolled north, salt ticking the undercarriage like rain on a tin roof. A bus sat at a funny angle, rear wheels trying to invent geometry. The driver had that face that says, "If I move, I'm an idiot. If I don't, I'm in the news." I nosed Plow 14 into the snow in front of him and carved out a bed he could stand in without making a new mistake. He tipped his head, eased his way, and the bus found the arterial like it had been planned. Two teenagers in puffers clapped. If you've never seen teenagers clap for civic work, you've never plowed through midnight in a city that remembers how to be a village. But the night wasn't done transitioning from test to plot. "Liam," said Aiden, and now his voice carried a weight I recognized from men who've had to count backwards out of panic. "We've got Generator B doing its on-off performance art. CPAP and 2 NEBs are on Circuit A. If B lies again, I need you to think about a windbreak on fruit so we can open the ED vestibule doors without turning it into an ice rink. Do not block the ambulance swing. If you can, split the wind with your cab and we'll run mats. A plow truck as a hospital windbreak was not in the manual, but manuals are thinner than nights like this." "I'm 5 out," I said. "I'll park where the wind ends up being your problem and not your enemy." "You talk like a guy who's moved grandmothers in March," he said. "I grew up moving grandmothers in March," I said, and we didn't need to laugh to mean it. As I swung back toward fruit, a cruiser rolled by slow, the officer inside making eye contact like he was checking on my soul. I lifted the blade, idled into the bite of the wind, framed the vestibule and bay 2 between my headlights, and let the plow become a wall. The hospital doors opened and a blast of air negotiated through the space I'd made. A volunteer taped down mats like she was anchoring hope. Aiden appeared then. Not just a voice anymore, but a body in motion. He had dark hair that the storm had kissed and left messy on purpose. Mass General ID on a blue lanyard, neon green vest with reflective stripes that said he knew how to be seen. He looked shorter than the voice and somehow taller than the night. "You must be Liam," he said, stepping close enough that the wind had to go around us. Up close, I could read the details my ears had already learned. Steady without boredom. Gentle without apology, eyes that take the room's pulse, then decide what it is. "You must be Aiden," I said, and barely kept the relief out of my grin. "Let me get you a tea, liar," he said. "Your voice says coffee." "Your blood says hot water." He disappeared and reappeared so quickly I suspected cloning. He handed me a flimsy paper cup that suddenly felt like a blanket. "Sip, and tell me if your spreader's sputtering. I can hear it from the vestibule." "Sound man," I said. "Breath man," he answered. "Same church, different windows." A woman slipped on the threshold, catching herself with a small yelp. Aiden was there with a palm and a word. "Pause," he said, like he had the authority to rearrange gravity. She obeyed. He placed her hand on the rail like he was teaching a dance. "Now go." She did. Every good hospital teaches ritual. Some people are born fluent. The radio chimed, brassier now with drama. "Citywide to units. Jackknife tractor trailer at O'Neill Tunnel southbound. State police are staging at Atlantic Ave. Do not allow secondary piles at Merrimac and Causeway. Keep Cambridge flowing for EMS. Plows don't solve jackknives. We keep the town from pretending it has a second job." I held my post until a lull suggested the storm had to take a breath. "I'm going to do a camber cut on Cambridge," I told Aiden, "and shave Merrimac so they don't build a second problem trying to stare at the first." Affirmed. he said, the word landing like a permission slip. And Liam, thank you for not letting the bay become a snowbank. I wish I could write thanks into the storm. Get me a Sharpie, I said. I'll write it on the plow, he laughed. The wind tried to pretend it hadn't noticed. I carved the camber cut, throwing snow to the leeward like I was teaching it where to sit. Blue strobes bounced off red brick and green signage. A guy in a long coat tried to cross against the gust and discovered physics. I eased the truck to give him a wind shadow, and he gave me a nod. I'll keep in my pocket for April. At Merrimac, a cluster of pedestrians argued with a drift taller than their legs. I sliced it into digestible pieces, watched them go, and resisted the urge to parent their hats. MGH, incoming ambulance via Leverett, came a voice that sounded like it had been up for 30 years. Patient with vent. Request fruit staying open. Fruit is a promise, I said into the mic, and the bay doors answered by holding still. But the truly shocking part was a question I didn't hear until I was in the middle of it. What happens when I am the problem if I don't ask for help? The world tightened. You can feel those moments the way your hands can tell if a line is under load. I felt something wobble in me, not fear exactly, but the shadow of it. The storm wasn't a new language, but suddenly I couldn't remember a word. I took a breath and it got stuck halfway in like I'd forgotten how long my ribs were. The tea was warm and insufficient. It happens. Panic is a guest with bad timing. I put the truck in park and let the blade kiss the asphalt in a peace offering. Liam, Aiden's voice came through not dramatic, not loud, just calibrated. Still with me? Right here, I said, because it was true and because I wanted it to be truer. I watched the snow in the headlights and remembered all the winters where my old man drove a city pickup and whistled to hide that he didn't want me to see him worry. The whistle had been a cue. This was mine. Say yes to still with me and then go back to doing the job you know you can do. Right here, I said again, to him and to the storm, and to the part of me that had mislaid a word, and I rolled. Bay 2 swallowed an ambulance like a friend who'd left the porch light on. Aiden moved at the hinge of things, door and gurney and breath and names. I caught pieces. Mrs. Klein, we've got you. 10 centimeters, we're ready. Battery on vent is at 70. We have shore. And the sentences braided into something that felt like the city telling the truth to itself. I drove until the fuel needle started speaking in workplace memos. South End Dispatch told me Station 12 still had a diesel tank that hadn't learned the word empty. I threaded back onto Cambridge, promised Fruit one more pass, and headed for Shawmut, where the station lights threw a modest party in the snow. A firefighter in a knit cap handed me a jerry can with the reverence due to the only ritual that matters when your truck drinks like an animal. Big night, he said. Night's just loud, I said. We're the ones making it true. Back on Cambridge, the storm modulated from shout to argument. The snowflakes got heavier and fewer. They landed with little thumps like apologies. Citywide came back with scar tissue in its voice. Jackknife cleared to one lane. Expect residual. Green line power is holding. Side streets will be locals only until we remember what a map is. My phone chimed with a text from an unknown number, and that particular confidence people who know your name have when they use it without introducing themselves. T again? I didn't ask how he got my number. There are a dozen ways when you work under the same storm. I tapped back with my fat fingers, always. Because I am. Then, because I realized I had stolen the phrasing from a man I'd never met until tonight, I added, still with me? I watched the 3 dots stutter, then, right here, when I rolled back to Fruit. The vestibule looked like a triage version of a living room, people in chairs that had decided to be furniture and family, orange slices on a plate someone had found by believing in kitchens, a charging table with a swarm of phones, drinking from a hub that had been labeled Cathedral B, kind, something in my sternum, unclenched like it had remembered gravity wasn't, punishment. Aiden found me by the rail where the snow liked to pretend it worked here. He stood too close for strangers and exactly right for teammates. He was shorter than me by a head and bigger than me by the size of a decision. Up close, I saw his hands. No theater, no tremor. Steady as metronomes who don't need to be right to be useful. Just regular and kind. We held it, he said. It held us, I replied. He laughed. That brief exhalation you give a night for not killing you. And then he stepped closer, forehead to mine for one soft beat. PG-13, consent-sized, the kind of hello you only say when you've already worked together for hours and saved the same strangers with different verbs. A security camera above the bay door rotated like a cat, pretending it wasn't watching. We stepped apart because a nurse yelled, "Aiden!" in the tone clipboards require, and the wind decided to try a new trick. If this were a song, we'd fade out there. But storms insist on codas. Citywide to units. Water main break at Merrimac and Staniford. Icing reported at bus stop. Do not re-energize shelter heaters until Public Works confirms dry ground. Tow requested for sedan with the ambition of a canoe. Water and electricity hate being in the same sentence. I idled to the corner and squinted through flurries at the bus shelter. Icicles hung like punctuation marks. The ground was a sheet of glass disguised as helpful. The shelter heater glowed orange, as willing as a Labrador, as dangerous as a hairdryer in a bathtub. I keyed the mic. Deny heat. Salt down. Sand over. We'll call City Light when it's just cold and dry. Affirmed, Aiden said, and his voice when he spoke in affirmations sounded like a promise someone had taught him right. I shook sand into the corners until they looked like cupcakes made by a practical god. The teens in puffers reappeared and tested the footing like halfbacks. One slid, recovered, bowed to the shelter like it had said his name. When I got back to Fruit, the night had decided to apologize. The snow developed the big, lazy flakes you forgive. The wind forgot its grammar. A woman in a janitor's jacket squeezed past with a mop and the posture of someone who cleans while the rest of us get credit. I lifted the blade and let the truck idle where it had memorized its role. A few hours passed in compressed minutes. Aiden handing a hot pack to a man whose hands shook because winter and not because failure. A volunteer labeling insulin coolers with neat block letters, each name a small monument. Reyes, Span, Goldman. A kid reading out phone battery percentages like election results. Every time I thought the room might tear, it stitched itself back together with a new thread. A laugh, a thank you, a breath counted and found sufficient. Near dawn, Maskov posted a map with the storm's footprint. The kind of infographic you send your out-of-state relatives so they believe your commute is a story. MGH retweeted with a photo from the bay. 2 figures under the vestibule lights, one in an orange coat, one in a neon vest, foreheads inclined for the length of a heartbeat. The caption read, "We held the door." You held each other. Boston, you did good. There are a dozen ways to end a night like that. I chose the one with noodles at a place near Haymarket that refuses to be too fancy for storm workers. We sat at the counter because booths are for people who don't change their minds twice per minute. He ordered tea because of course he did. I ordered coffee because some lies are also vitamins. Where'd you learn to say do not like a blessing? I asked. My tata was a firefighter in Lowell, he said. He made instructions sound like invitations to survive. I learned the accent later. He smiled past the rim of his cup. You talk like someone who's moved fridges for ants and snowbanks for neighbors. Both, I said. And I know the difference between help and getting in the way because my ma will tell you which one you did. Name everything, he said, nodding toward the hospital across the river as if it could hear. People behave better when they hear their names. Streets too, I said. I talk to Beacon, Blossom, Cambridge like they're cousins who will answer if I use the right tone. Do they? Tonight they did, I said, and realized I meant we did. We didn't write vows or plans on napkins. We wrote rules on the part of the brain that memorizes patrol routes and recipes. When NWS paints the radar like a bruise, he texts here. When the city rings the bell that wakes plows from their barns, I text on my way. He tucks a spare spacer into my glove box with a label that says, "For a kid who named it because that's who he is." I leave a roll of gaffer's tape in his command bin because labels are love after midnight. He tells me do not, and I hear I want you around. I say leave me one clean cut, and he hears I will. The storm left, and the city tried to remember its shape. We all pretended we weren't sore and then admitted we were. Days later, in a quieter snow that felt like a pet instead of a project, we stood under the Zachem and watched a plow train chew the Leverett connector into lanes. He wore a hat I wanted to steal, and he let me. We practiced the one-beat hello again in a public space no camera cared about. and the space between our foreheads felt like something a city might issue as a credential. Authorized to keep lanes clear. Sometimes the safest place in Boston isn't behind the biggest plow or under the warmest lamps. Sometimes it's the inch between two people who've chosen the same job in different uniforms, the place where instructions become comfort and names become the handles you hold on to when the night is slippery. Sometimes it's a voice on the radio that says, "Do not at exactly the right second," and your truck is already committing to the right idea. The next nor'easter will find us. It always does. The snow will stack on Beacon and Blossom and pretend not to care about ambulances. People will wear sneakers and regret it. Somebody will try to take Storrow because Destiny has a to-do list. And we'll answer, "Blade down, salt on, words true." He'll keep rooms from breaking. I'll keep lanes from lying. He'll ask, "Still with me?" And I'll say, "Right here." And we'll make a city that remembers how to keep promises to strangers, slow orders, sure hands, yes,